I've always stayed even killed with the postseason. I'm down 0-1 in the first round. I was down 3-1 in the finals. So I'm the last guy to ask about how you're going to feel the next couple of days.
LeBron James sounding confident with that statement after Game 1 and then went out and had a statement game in the Game 2 win over the Indiana Pacers to even that series at 1 game apiece. I will stop doubting you, LeBron, from now on. Sekou Smith here in Atlanta somehow, some way. Greg Anthony, my main man, where are you? I know we're all running around on the playoff yellow brick road. Where are you, in New Orleans?
I'm down in the bayou, baby. I'm in the bayou.
You down there where it's going to be electric. Pelicans.
Yeah, it's going to be an incredible environment tonight.
What an unbelievable first couple of games in that series. I mean, all of the playoffs are crazy, GA. But does that series jump out at you as the one that's the real shocker, obviously, with the Blazers being down 0-2?
I thought New Orleans would win the series.
You did?
So
okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I felt like, look, they got the best player in the series, and true. I just, I don't think people appreciate how good Drew Holiday was because he doesn't get the accolades. Rajon Rondo, he's not it's not as if he hadn't been in this situation. And then when you look at Portland's roster, Dame Lillard, I voted first team All-NBA, absolutely deserving.
Right.
C.J. McCollum is a really good player, but there's nobody else from a roster standpoint that you look at and you feel like, one, they got a ton of experience, they've been there, and you know what you're going to get from them. So,
right.
I just felt like New Orleans coming into the series, they have better players. And, Portland's got a better bench, but New Orleans is not going to utilize their bench. They're not going to play their bench, guys averaging 28, 30 minutes. They're going to have their best player on the floor. So, barring injury, I liked them. I thought it would go 6. So, like I said, I kind of expected it to be 1-1 after 2. Right. But for them to get both was impressive.
Yeah. GA, we got an action-packed show on the Hang Time podcast this week. You're in New Orleans, obviously, calling that Blazers-Pelicans Game 3 Thursday night. I'm getting a stopover here home in Atlanta. We're going to talk to John Schumann later. I have no idea where Schumann is. He's somewhere between Toronto, Washington, somewhere on the East Coast. And also got a chance to chat with Steve Ashburner about LeBron James and that series as well. So just a ton going on right now, GA. I got to be honest with you. And I watched Houston in Minnesota, the first 2 games in Houston. I've been stunned positively and negatively at some of the performances I've seen from some of these young guys in the playoffs. Karl Anthony Towns is struggling in ways that I don't even think he realizes. Derrick Rose is playing better in that series than he is. And the Rockets are up 2-0 without having played a spectacular complete game as a group. They got 44 from James Harden in Game 1, and then Chris Paul and Gerald Green went bananas in Game 2 to help them blow the Timberwolves out. But I asked Tom Thibodeau about this the other day. If that first game film from Game 1 was enough to convince Karl Anthony Towns of what he doesn't know about the intensity and energy required in the playoffs. And I think Tibbs tried to take up for him and kind of cover for him, but you've been watching this stuff. Do you see some young guys that have been shell-shocked by the intensity of playoff basketball?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I think also the reality is they've never been in this situation before. I mean, Crosby played in the playoffs. He's never been in a scenario where he understands how much more physical it is, valuing possessions. It's hard to have an appreciation for something until you're going through it.
Right.
This group, they just haven't been there yet. So I'm not surprised from that standpoint. And also, it's why the Rockets are so good. Like they don't always play perfect games. I mean, they didn't win 65 games where Harden got 44 every night.
Right.
Harden went to 18. They are a balanced team. They can beat you with their defense. They can beat you when one of their 2 best players doesn't play well, which has been the case in essence the first 2 games. Right. Chris Paul was basically a non-factor, and
he struggled.
Harden really didn't shoot it well in the first game. So, I mean, that's not really surprising that they've been able to win those first two games the way they have. I think what it should do is let people appreciate just how good this team is. You know, everybody wants to hark back on, well, you know, Chris Paul hasn't done this in the postseason or James Harden hasn't done that in the postseason. And the last time I checked, this is the first time that either guy has been a 1 seed.
Wow. Yeah.
Or they're favorite to do something.
That's a great point.
And now they're doing it collectively, you know, in terms of them being together. And I think they're a really good team. I think they're going to have a great chance to win that Western Conference.
Well, I've already scouted out all the spots we're going to hit during the conference finals. I did a little reconnaissance work. We had 2 days in between games. So I was getting familiar with Houston in ways that I haven't previously. They're good. They have a deep, eclectic roster. Gerald Green was fantastic. He came out and hit 4 threes in a 6-minute stretch where he just went bananas and flipped the game upside down. I always love what the playoffs brings, GA, in terms of people don't know how good Drew Holiday is if they haven't watched Pelicans basketball season. So there's a whole faction of playoff fans who are now, you know, getting their eyes open. I mean, somebody had the nerve to say to me, "Yeah, this Holiday guy, like, what is he in his second year?" And I'm like, man, this guy was an all-star in Philly, you know. But people literally casually watch the league throughout the course of the season and then turn on the playoffs and want to watch every night and have to play catch up on some of the better players in the league.
Yeah. No, it's a great point, and that's, again, it speaks to how good he's been. And remember, too, he hasn't had the full season, and
right.
He's also been an all-star. Like, you know, it wasn't that long ago that he was with Andre Iguodala, Philadelphia Sixers, and they were in the postseason, that young upstart team. So, like, to your point, they're a really good basketball team. They're going to be difficult to deal with, and it's going to be fun. Like, I think that second-round matchup could be so entertaining if they're able to go ahead and win this series and face a Golden State team. Not that Golden State won't be the favorite, but, you know, they're a better team than I think we realize because we get caught up in what the record is. But when you factor in everything that they've gone through this year, they're a really good team. And that's starting to show itself here in the postseason. And I'm just hoping people really appreciate what they're seeing with this group and how special not just Drew and obviously Rajon, but how special Anthony Davis is. And also Mirotic has been really good as well.
Yeah.
He's a guy kind of gets lost, but his value to that team, you know, you really can't put enough weight on it. He's been terrific as well.
Yeah, the Beardless Wonder has definitely shown me something and given them a lift. Speaking of beards, GA, I got a chance to talk with Steve Ashburner about LeBron James and the spotlight that is on him right now in what could be, I guess, his final campaign in Cleveland. So we'll take a listen to this, and on the other side, we'll talk about it and also catch up with our man, John Schumann. Finally, we get the man himself on the Hang Time Podcast here, Steve Ashburner of NBA.com, the elder statesman of the bunch. Ash, how are you, my friend? I know you've been all over the place, Board of Governors, playoffs, doing everything that you always do, but I appreciate you taking a few minutes.
I prefer venerable.
Venerable.
You might want to go with that next time.
Okay, we'll go with venerable. Elder statesman makes you sound a little. You're right. We'll go with venerable. Ash, you got a chance to see LeBron in the bounce back game, I guess, of that first round series with the Pacers. Yeah. I maintain that LeBron, being the most engaged, alert, aware, whatever you want to, whatever term you want to use for a guy who's plugged in and clued into basically everything that's going on around him at all times. Did it strike you as odd, not just his performance after game one, but his comments after game one, where he kind of went into his bag about, I've been down, you don't ask me about how I'm going to feel the next couple of days.
Yeah.
I mean, was that strange hearing him talk like that?
That part of it, I guess it's at the point, and I've been around him enough and heard this kind of stuff so often that it doesn't even grab me anymore. I just sort of breeze right on by it because he does that. And, at first, blush, it seems not a good thing. It's the old, there's no I in team, and he seems to distance himself when it suits him from the rest of the bunch, the other Cavaliers or whatever it is. And I think largely it's not a good look. I try to understand it, and I say, well, he's had so many different teammates, and the we that you would talk about, it's an ever-changing thing, particularly this season with players coming and going. On the other hand, it's not as if he didn't sign off on some of that, both good and bad. But yeah, it's not ideal. I don't think it's ideal. I think he has one eye on his legacy at all times, one eye on how he's being seen, and it's a little tricky way to go through, a very, a heavily burdened playing career game to game, and so I just it is odd. Now his performance in game one, I kind of understand it, but it was a little bit of a force feeding to guys. I think he wanted to give everybody touches and experience all at once. Like you guys haven't been to the playoffs, like Larry Nance and Jordan Clarkson, and Rodney Hood, or Rodney Hood was briefly, whatever. Here I'm going to force feed you, and you're going to get your experience ramped up really quick. And it didn't work out. And LeBron was almost passive. We've seen that before, where he feels out games like that. And then he had to overcompensate and just, blow the roof off the place in game two by scoring, the Cavaliers for 16 points and 29 and a half and 46 in the game. And they were still fortunate to fend off the Pacers from that game. So I've seen him up close often enough, and I understand fully why he is as polarizing as he is.
Yeah, and as the fact that the Pacers should be confident. As far as I'm concerned, they got the split and almost had a chance to do more. They shouldn't go home with their heads down. They should go home feeling like they've got a chance to win this series. Like they look like the better team for more time in this series so far than Cleveland has.
I agree with you. I mean, and they took Cleveland's best shot. I mean, if you have LeBron coming at you like that, downhill, attacking, scoring mode, and putting up all those points he did at any, early in the game and over the course of the game, and your knees don't buckle, I mean, that's a victory right there. And they came within a miss of a 27-footer by Oladipo of sending that game into overtime, perhaps. And who knows what happens there? I agree with you. They have played better. They have sort of. They had to recover from Oladipo's, absences early in the game with foul trouble. He only played 8 minutes in the first half. They're going to be on their court the next two games. I don't think that it's unreasonable to think that, Indiana could be up in that series when it shifts back to game 5. And they're in a very good place. And I think they have more reserve because they have certain guys that haven't played all that well.
True.
And you'd expect that, it's the old thing about in the playoffs, your role players play better at home. Well, that's, those guys have that coming their way now. Now, they just have to be careful George Hill doesn't get confused and think he's back home for,
He is from Broad Ripple. That's right. That's right. Steve Ashburner joining me here on the Hang Time Podcast. Ash, I tend to get caught up in narratives, and I start reading tea leaves when I probably shouldn't. Some of LeBron's behavior this season makes me think that he's doing the same thing the rest of us have been doing all season, which is looking at July 1st with free agency in mind and a clear understanding that this season, if it's potentially his last in Cleveland, will be not necessarily a referendum on his second stint there, but certainly an odd way to cap his second stint with the Cavaliers. He knows that they don't have the firepower. They're not healthy enough. They don't have the cohesion right now to beat the Warriors or potentially even Houston in the finals. And LeBron's smart enough. He understands the game well enough to know it would take a miracle for them to get to the finals and then be able to knock off one of those teams if all things were equal. Do you feel like and LeBron, maybe it's hard for him to hide it because, he does mention his beautiful mind all the time. You feel like sometimes he acts out and kind of wears his feelings on his chest a little bit when he doesn't even realize it?
Yeah, I think he is. He's been in the spotlight so much that I think a lot of us have gotten, pretty good at reading him. And what you were talking about early on, what it made me think about was his first year back in Cleveland, 14-15, when he went to the postseason with that team, and Kevin Love got hurt, had his, shoulder pulled out against Boston.
Yeah.
Kyrie was not 100%. He was gimpy in the early rounds. And then he, the knee fractured, and he was done in the finals. And LeBron, to me, really embraced that sort of wounded crew of overachievers, as far as the supporting cast. Matthew Dellavedova, Tristan Thompson before the big contract. And he seemed pretty fulfilled when that group got to 6 games in the finals against Golden State.
Yes.
I mean, I saw them in earlier rounds against Chicago, and I think he was ready to bag it, and all of a sudden he hit a shot from the corner, and he bought into Dellavedova and the other guys, and he made it work because he was just freshly back, and he knew there was work to be done. I think that I've seen it differently this year, where he's in no big hurry to put his arms around whichever group they've had on the roster. And okay, trade deadline, they got rid of 6 guys, brought in 4, looked like everything was going to be all sweetness and light once they got a little bit of time together. And that hasn't worked out so well. And I still, it seems like he's holding this group out at arm's length a little bit more than he did back then. Now, does he leave? Does he not leave? I mean, I thought when they won the championship in 2016, he sort of earned the right to do whatever he wants to do the rest of the way. Now, we all have the right to react to it and to assess, well, do we think that's a good move? Is that impressive? Is that, kind of cutthroat, whatever it is? But he's earned the right to do it. When he left the first time, obviously he had the right business-wise, but it was a brutal, cold way to go.
Yeah.
This time around, I feel like, okay, you want to go play in New York, go play in New York. You want to go to L.A., go to L.A., whatever it is. You want to play for Popovich, do that. We'll assess after the fact. If it looks like he's chasing rings, I personally won't be that impressed. I don't think he needs another ring to move up a spot on Mount Rushmore. But and I guess that'll be the question whenever they're down, with 3 defeats in a best-of-7 series is, does he bail? Is this it? I mean, does he have what it takes to come back if they have to come back? Or will it be, July 1st has gotten closer? It's a good marker to pay attention to.
Yeah. I'm thinking about the aftermath, the first time he left Cleveland and the culture they felt was built, during his first run there, the front office, You heard ownership talk about this championship culture and that they got to the finals. They felt like, well, even without LeBron, we've built this framework to compete at a high level. And we all know that wasn't the case. Ash, I'm worried if he were to leave again, it would be the same thing. There's not a framework in place. No, there is no Kyrie in place to take over as the face of that franchise. Cleveland would be right back in that same predicament in terms of having to rebuild basically from the ground up. There's not enough talent, high-end talent, superstar talent, for them to maintain a position among the top teams in the Eastern Conference if LeBron leaves.
Well, and I would say that's probably the norm for most teams that are built around a star. Than not. I mean, rare that you can lose Kevin Durant and you still have Russell Westbrook to lean on,
right?
And then you start patching around him. I mean, most teams, if they lose a guy of great stature, whether it was, I just refer to my days in Minnesota with Garnett. If Giannis Antetokounmpo were to walk out of Milwaukee, it's hard to be prepared for that kind of a loss. I mean, I'm a conspiracy buff enough that I keep thinking, I wonder if LeBron would leave there drive down the value of that franchise and then try to pick it up, at a bargain rate when he fulfills his dreams of owning an NBA franchise. You think that he has equity in it now in terms of his playing ability, but if he's not around there, I think they drop on the Forbes rankings. So, yeah, it's not good, and the idea that they would end up with the fortuitous draft situations, even though they used one of them on Anthony Bennett, that's always a long shot. So, yeah, not great. But, again, if he swoops in and Gilbert sells to him or something like that, and I'm just talking off the top of my head here.
Yeah,
but,
I love the twisted. I love it. I love the twisted theories, Ash. That's perfect. Because you're right. Listen, I think LeBron is such – people have been asking me, what do you think LeBron's going to do? I'm like, whatever he's going to do, it won't be on a whim. He doesn't do he doesn't do that. He's the calculated guy. He's the one who's probably had this plotted out and graphs and charts and, lists. I guarantee if he isn't, his crew has, his guys have. They don't do anything accidentally.
Well, I've been a witness to the history of it. I mean, I was in Cleveland when he was first auditioning those teams in 2010.
Right.
We had them all come to him, and we're standing on the street corner watching cars full of Mike D'Antoni and the Knicks contingent, or the Clippers contingent, or whoever coming in and knocking on the door and basically pleading with LeBron to give them a chance to make him ridiculously richer. And and I was in the gym in Connecticut when he had that ill-fated bad idea TV show, and he was very uncomfortable. He was sprinting to the restroom in between commercial breaks, and it was just a bad look all the way around. I think he has become much more mature and much more of a businessman. But on the other hand, I'm not sure he knows right now what he's going to do. I mean, I think that they may have their lists and they may have the advantages here and the negatives there. But in terms of actually flipping the switch, I don't think a decision has been made.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough to walk. If he walks away from that franchise a second time, that'll be something. It'll be.
Yeah. I don't think people have a right to Cleveland have a right to feel betrayed. And here's the other thing. I mean, if you're right, they're not set up great in terms of what their assets are to move forward. What do you have, Kevin Love for another year, and who knows what happens there? And he's not that kind of a player anyway. But do you want to be paying LeBron the absolute top dollar in the NBA when he's 36, when he's 37? I mean, is that the best thing for a Cleveland franchise too? I mean, I know that's a harsh calculation to make.
Sure.
But is this going to be a sustainable performance that we saw out of LeBron this year? One of his best years ever, 15 years in, at age 33. I mean, at what point does it start to tip?
Yeah.
And he starts to go downhill and needs more help, and maybe he'll feel he won't have that in Cleveland. He has to go find it in a place like, Philadelphia or something.
That's a great point. Something tells me, Ash, you're going to be there when his decision's made. I mean, I'm just going based on the history.
Yeah,
You'll probably be there.
I'm fine with that. As long as he wants to go, I'll chronicle it.
So, Ash, you got a great piece, a Q&A on NBA.com, where you talk with former NBA ref Monty McCutchen, who has now been promoted to vice president, the head of the referee and development and training program with the league. Some fascinating stuff in there at a time when, let's face it, the player, referee, coach dynamic has been in the crosshairs all season long, with the aforementioned LeBron James, Kevin Durant, and other star players getting tossed, piling up technicals, that whole relationship seemingly eroding before our eyes and worse than it already was, which was not very good. What was your biggest takeaway from your conversation with Monty McCutchen about where they're going to go to repair this?
It's a new era for the referees and the players, right? I mean, we've heard that before. Frankly, I think that Monty's appointment in December is a good thing for the referees only because of the very recent past. I think the morale for the referees was pretty low with some of the executives that have been overseeing their operations. Mm-hmm. It got away from, the hardcore long-term veteran officials who moved into those roles, and you had some suits, and you had some people that the rank and file refs didn't always feel that, Olympic Tower, NBA headquarters had their backs. And I think it showed up in their work, and it showed up in their demeanor, and they weren't getting the right kind of advice, and you had a real divide, and the divide showed itself where we see it, which is out on the floor with the players and the coaches. I think Monty's first priority is training and interpersonal stuff. And I think that's a logical place because, the accuracy stuff, it should be taking care of itself by now. I mean, if you take out whatever percentage of players on a given night where reasonable people will disagree, was that a block or a charge? And it could have gone either way. So you can't get 100%. So you take out that percentage, and now what's left between the replay center in New Jersey and the last 2-minute reports the next day, which, I would think would inform the next game's work by a referee. They're hitting a pretty high average of correct calls. So now, to me, it gets into interpersonal stuff, and that's where the work needs to be done. They've got young referees, guys who or gals that come to this without a lot of other career experience or life experience. They haven't developed some of the mature just relationship skills and negotiating tactics and everything else that you can use in a heated moment. And they'll dig in or they'll feel threatened. And I've seen that a lot and talked with a lot of referees about it. And they feel that, you need more experience, or if you don't get that, you need, in essence, coaching. You need, people to sort of get you up and shortcut for the years that you don't already have under your belt. So I think that he's going to be a big guy for training, and so, it's the kind of thing where you can have a game where there's, a bunch of questionable calls or calls that could have gone, and yet the coaches and the players are all kind of calm about it. Everything's fine. And you can have a play where there's like one play and everybody goes crazy. And I think a lot of that is just how it's all handled. Am I being heard? Do I get to air my side of things? And he also would stick up for the referees when I talked with him. He said repeatedly, it's not just the refs that need to be poised. It's the players and the coaches, too. I mean, everybody's a grown-up. Everybody's supposed to be a professional.
Yeah, I agree with him. That is the one thing I've been saying consistently, Ash, is that it's going to take everybody coming to some kind of agreement about, the way you conduct yourself. I mean, just a shred of respect could help, solve some of this. Because a lot of it is
I know you said that you can't complain after every dang call because most of those are right. Yeah. So then you have no credibility. It's the old boy who cried wolf. You have no credibility when you might actually have a case.
Yeah, exactly. I just don't understand. I mean, I watched it in every game that we're at. I mean, I'm at a playoff game and I see a guy knock another guy off his path. And the first thing he does is start jumping around like he didn't hit him. It's like, man, you just knocked him 4 feet off. They all have to come to some sort of understanding about how to conduct themselves for the better, for the greater good of the game. And to get us out of these buildings in a decent hour, they got to do better. They all got to do a better job.
Well, another thing I hear from refs, though, too, is that it's a sign of the times. Right. I mean, the old AAU thing and young people not respecting authority and questioning, teachers and cops and this and that and everything else. I mean, there's an undercurrent of that, and that's going to be a bigger, I think, issue. That could be a generational thing. So they're going to have to chip away at it as best they can. But, if there's a sense that, if you can talk back to your teacher, you can, whatever, thumb your nose at a youth coach, then, why am I going to listen to this referee, who's I disagree with just from the moment I look at him.
Yeah, well, the powers that be need to also acknowledge the technology jump that we have. We didn't have 7 million angles to look at every call the way we used to. I mean, for as many times I think a player has been out of line, there has been an instance where, the call was missed. But that happens. That's human. That's a part of the human condition of this game, that there are going to be missed calls. But unfortunately for the refs, we see every single one of them and every possible angle now when they miss these calls. Ash, let you get out of here on this last thing, and it was something that struck me last night in the locker room in Houston when the news came down that Greg Popovich's wife had passed away. And first and foremost, our condolences and our thoughts and prayers go out to the Popovich family, to Coach Popovich and his family on such a, an unbelievable, moment to happen. And to have it happen when it did, on a night when teams are preparing. I was shocked at the reaction in the Rockets locker room of the players, guys who have never played for Greg Popovich, but hold him in such high regard. And I noticed Kevin Durant's reaction. I saw LeBron's emotional reaction when he's talking to Allie LaForce afterwards. Did you sense a lot of that in the locker room, around the building, from people when the news spread? Maybe just how shocked they were, and obviously how sad they were for Greg Popovich on the loss of his wife?
No doubt about it. I mean, it took the air out of Quicken Loans Arena, at least around the players and the coaches that I saw. In the silly post-game presser that, we all ask our questions, or, Pop will air somebody out there or whatever. You had coaches, and they were either introducing their remarks by expressing their condolences, for Aaron Popovich and the loss to the Popovich family, or they were finishing up. Nate McMillan answered all his questions, and before he moved away from the microphone, he expressed his sorrow for that. Tyronn Lue did it beforehand. You had players that were really thrown. I mean, Look, everybody in the NBA, it's a vital, energetic, young, healthy, pro sports, people at their peak physical powers, and, to have the dark cloud descend of death in any way, is tough. So, and then you factor in the respect that there is for Popovich. And frankly, I was most stunned for a guy who is as, widely revered and well-known as he is, and has been on the scene for so long, that he has kept his private life, other than the fact that he enjoys wine, and he has certain political views. He's kept his private life, really behind a curtain. I mean, I think from what I saw with the TNT coverage, they didn't necessarily have photos of him and his wife until they maybe sprung loose from the Spurs or something and trickled in, because didn't hear much about that, and that's probably to his credit. When you're in his, now not that it's the toughest place when you're successful in San Antonio and you're beloved there, but I mean, most of these guys, to have your family out there where they're subject to shots and criticisms and just cheap tactics, I think it's a smart thing to sort of compartmentalize, and I was mostly stunned by that when you heard, okay, married for 4 decades, extended illness. We didn't know any of this stuff, and I'm sure there was a very close circle of people that did, but it didn't get out across the league. Whereas we knew right away when Rodney Hood had twins and got that news last night.
Exactly.
There's various things that it's always been a warped relationship, though. We know so much about these people generally, and they know nothing about us, and that's fine. But it is they live in a fishbowl, and Popovich somehow was able to to sort of paint the inside of the bowl that we couldn't always see in.
Yeah, it's a tough thing. Obviously, we've all dealt with loss, I'm sure, in our own families.
It's a big family, You've seen that, right? I mean, the NBA, they compete their guts out, and yet there's a fraternity element that we often will complain about. Don't be buddy-buddy with that guy while you're trying to beat him in the best-of-7 series. But they sort of all, follow the same paths, and there is that camaraderie.
It is, and I always think about it, Summer League, when you see the coaches and, all these players and everybody, and you have to remind yourself how connected they all are, by the game and by this environment. Again, it was just I don't remember being in a locker room and seeing the instant reactions on players' faces when they heard that. And I agree with you, Ash. I think some were shocked because they didn't know, that either Pop was married for that long or that his wife was battling an illness. So it was a it was a surprise in several ways for a lot of people. Again, our prayers, our thoughts certainly go out to the Popovich family at a time when I'm sure they could use the same from everybody. Ash, I appreciate you as always, sir. I'm looking forward to catching up with you at some point down this playoff road. Normally, we're on dueling tracks. I'm usually out west. You're usually on the east. We meet up in the finals. So maybe, who knows? Maybe I will get a dispatch to an Eastern Conference city sooner rather than later, and we can enjoy some conversation and maybe one of those good meals in one of those Midwestern towns that I'm so familiar and fond of.
There you go. Yeah, you manage to find your way out west, but usually that's more in the wintertime when there's an extra edge for that. But don't hesitate. The phone rings. Don't hesitate. You don't have to have it hooked up to one of these recording devices to just give it a shout out. Always great to talk with you, Sekou.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ash. I appreciate you, sir.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Steve Ashburn, never a dull conversation with the Ash Man. He's always got some interesting insights. Been all over the place, too. Board of Governors, playoffs. So always glad to catch up with the Ash Man. There's somebody else we need to talk to, though, GA. And I know he's got something smart alecky to throw at us for the playoffs on the Schumann stat. John Schumann, what's up, sir? Give us the stat first. I don't even want to talk to you about the playoffs. Give me Schumann's
You want
stat.
to do a little trivia?
Yes, give me the trivia
All right.
first.
All right, so in Game 1 against Indiana this weekend, LeBron recorded his 20th career playoff triple-double. I don't know if you remember, but his first career playoff triple-double was actually his first career playoff game.
I did not remember.
2006 against Washington, he had 32, 11, and 11 in his playoff debut.
Did he get it on Deshaun Stevenson?
I don't, but we're going to talk a little bit about his teammates.
Oh.
So he had 11 assists in that game. I want you to see how many of the 6 teammates that he assisted in that game you can name.
I don't even remember who. I don't even remember.
2005-06 Cavs.
Man, I don't
What's
even
that?
remember who played on that team. 2006
I'm
Cavs?
thinking Ilgauskas played.
Yeah, Ilgauskas is one. He had 1 assist to Ilgauskas. 5 more.
What about Boobie Gibson?
No, he wasn't on that. I don't know if he was on that team.
Oh,
He was a rookie in 2007, right?
Oh, yeah, I think you might be right.
When they went to the finals?
You might be right.
2006.
Yeah, I don't remember. Drew Gooden.
Drew Gooden, yes.
He played with
2
Drew Gooden,
assists to
right?
Drew Gooden.
Yeah.
Ilgauskas, Drew Gooden.
Larry Hughes.
Nope.
All right, next year.
Oh, Daniel Marshall.
Daniel Marshall,
No, he had
yes.
to throw out Daniel Marshall.
3
dime.
assists. Larry Hughes was on that team. Did not have any. It's possible he didn't play in that game.
Oh, okay.
I have to look back. But so yes, Daniel Marshall, Drew Gooden, Zydrunas Ilgauskas.
Mm-hmm.
Another one should be fairly easy. Another big that he played a lot with.
Anderson Varejao.
Anderson Varejao, right. 2 others are 2 guards.
E. Snow.
Eric Snow, correct.
Had to be Eric Snow.
Last one's kind of tough.
He was a guard
A guard.
with LeBron.
A little bit of a gunner.
Ricky Davis. No, I wasn't.
And it wasn't Boobie
No.
Gibson. Who else did LeBron play with back then? It was a vet. I know who it is. I just saw him in New Orleans. He's doing radio for the Pelicans now. David Wesley.
Nope.
Oh, shoot.
This guy is not known by his given first name.
And not known by his given first name.
His given first name was Ronald.
Ronald.
Oh, it's Flip Murray.
Flip Murray, yes.
Oh, my man. The Flips. I wonder what Flip Murray's doing now.
I like how Shu said, "Oh, well, this should be easy." That was like 13 years.
No, I didn't say all of them
I'm
should
like,
be easy. Flip Murray was not easy.
Ain't nothing easy to remember 13 years ago.
Man, I can't remember 13 minutes ago.
I think the only one I said should be easy was Varejao, as just far as a guy that he played with.
Shoot, what the hell made you come up with that as our trivia question?
I don't know. Interestingly, so I was looking at his triple doubles. He's only 3 times has he had 2 triple doubles in the same playoff series, and all 3 times were the finals. So in the 2013 finals against the Spurs, which the Heat won, he had 2 triple doubles. In the 2015 finals against the Warriors, which the Warriors won, he had 2, and then last year's finals, he had 2. It's interesting. He's never had more than one in any.
He's gonna need something this year.
We're gonna see.
He might need.
Can't wait to find out what happens with that series.
Yeah, he might need a few. Shu, GA and I were talking about what we've seen so far a little bit earlier. What's been something that stood out to you in the series you've been on, in the series that you're dealing with and tracking?
Well, I was in Philly for Game 1 and 2 of Sixers Heat, and those are two fun games. Even though the first game was a little bit of blowout come fourth quarter, it's just a fun. I just like the way both these teams are playing. They both do a lot of fun stuff offensively with setting screens for shooters and trying to get guys open. The Sixers lead the playoffs in both ball movement and player movement, so it's kind of fun, a lot of fun to watch them play.
Sure.
And it was interesting in Game 2. We're going to see Game 3 tonight. We're taping this on what is this, Wednesday? No, Thursday. We're going to see Game 3 tonight. But I like the adjustment the Heat made, just sort of pressuring Ben Simmons a little bit,
right?
And making the passes more difficult because the Heat, the Sixers are going to run their shooters all around. It's easier said than done to sort of stay at home on their shooters, but they were able to pressure the ball a little bit more and put the Sixers in a little bit more of a rush. And I thought that was a good adjustment. And then obviously Dwayne Wade was pretty incredible in Game 2. And it's funny, like the shots that he was making are, if this was a regular season game, the Sixers would just say, hey, mid-range shots off the dribble, in the long run, those shots aren't going to beat us. We're fine with that, with dealing with that in one game, over the course of 82, we're good with forcing those kinds of shots. But in a playoff series, you lost that game, and that game could, be the difference in a series like this. It's kind of interesting.
The sweeter the juice, baby.
Yeah, I remember a couple of years ago when Charlotte was playing Miami in the first round, and
D Wade was wearing his ninja outfit at the post game.
No, it was Steve Clifford. After one game, like Justice Winslow hit 4 threes in a game against the Hornets, and Clifford's like, "Well, what am I supposed to do? Like, that's the shots we want people take. Like, we want Justice Winslow to shoot jumpers. Like, and he miraculously hit 4. It's like you can, over the course of the season, you want that to happen, but in one game, anything fluky could happen, and then you lost because you were forcing something to happen, and the shots happen to go in, like the low percentage shots happen to go in, and it's kind of
that's the playoff game you play, though, right? That's the
it's fascinating to see. Do you adjust to that? Do like, all right, if some guy who doesn't shoot very well starts hitting threes, like if Giannis Antetokounmpo hits threes in a game, one playoff game, do you adjust to that? Do you start defending him like, oh, he's a shooter now, or do you try to continue to play the percentages? It's always interesting.
That's a good question, GA. What do you do?
Well, there's a couple things you got to keep in mind. One, this series, especially without Embiid, it's not a one-sided series. Two, what Philly did in Game 1, nobody ever does consistently. So just like you didn't expect them to shoot 64% from 3, I would be willing to bet whatever that they probably won't shoot that again on 33s. And also, in Dwayne Wade's case, at this stage of his career, two things. One, I'm okay with him making the shots he made, to your point, Shu, because they were all basically contested twos in terms of the tough jumpers. And there's a very good chance that at 36 years of age, he's not going to be able to carry them anymore. So, I mean, Philly's biggest issue in that game, I thought, was their offense was not nearly as effective. Ben Simmons actually was pretty good in terms of he was efficient. They didn't shoot the 3 as well. And Miami's equipped to defend their shooters, right? That's the thing. What makes this series for me so compelling is because Miami really does match up well with Philadelphia, absent Joel Embiid, because they've got as good an on-ball defender, perimeter defense as we have in the league. And so I just think that series is going to be it has a chance to go 6 or 7 games. I mean, it's just a really, really good series. from that standpoint. But I do think that one's going to be interesting to see if and when Embiid comes back. I guess he's doubtful for the third game, and I think that's what really will allow Philly to change the way. Then it becomes harder to play them because you don't have to double Ben Simmons, but I do think they're going to have to be in help mode when it comes to Embiid. Yeah, I know Whiteside's a solid player, but Whiteside hasn't been that effective when those two have matched up. But the other issue is how good will Embiid be having been out for this extended period of time and having never played in the postseason. So it's going to be – that's a really compelling one for me to see how all of those pieces play out. But it's going to be fun, man. That one, to me, two great defensive teams, a really good offensive team in Philly, great potentially at their whole. And Miami's a better offensive team than when you look at the personnel than you might think.
A lot of good unknowns in these playoffs, Shu. One thing I think we know well is that the Wizards are not going to play up to their own ridiculous expectations. They're an 8 seed and they went into the playoffs talking like they were the best team in basketball, like always. Are we watching the final straw for the Washington Wizards if they get swept by the Raptors, if they cannot find a way to scrap back and win a game or two in this series?
I mean, I'll be fascinated to see if their season ends quickly, whether it be 4 or 5 games in this series, how they try to shake things up this summer. Because John Wall's got a huge contract. I mean, I forget the last year that contract he's getting paid $40-some million.
Yikes! Wow.
And it's not because they're paying Wall a lot of money. They're paying Beal a lot of money. They're paying Otto Porter a lot of money.
Right.
And I assume that Beal and Porter have appeal, to other teams on the contracts that they're on. But it'll be fascinating. They are, we talked about this last week. They just ended the season in such disappointing fashion. And, it's hard to get too excited about what we've seen in the first 2 games with that team. And give credit to Toronto. They're playing terrific. The regular season has carried over into the postseason for them.
Thank
Obviously,
goodness.
the next series will be different.
Starters might have gone off the air if they'd have lost one of those.
The interesting thing is that the bench numbers have actually been a little bit better for Washington than for Toronto. It's just the Toronto starters have been really good. Ibaka has made shots, Anunoby has made shots, and DeRozan and Lowry have been great in facilitating, and Valanciunas is really good too. Like, it's amazing. The way he's evolved. I mean, maybe a year ago, even you would have thought that this guy can be, Valanciunas can be completely unplayable in some playoff series just because of his limitations defensively and offensively. But he's turned himself into a valuable piece for them.
Yeah, he did hot yoga and got his body all reshaped. I mean, I think he understood that he had to make some changes in order to be effective.
Yeah, well, the one thing too, though, with this. Remember, their best player did miss 40 games. So they're probably not an 8 seed if John Wall had been healthy this year. And so I don't know that I'm going to overreact. Like, I don't think the problem is their 3 best players. I think the problem is their next 6. That's the big issue if I'm the Wizards is they've got 2 guys in Mahinmi and Gortat who are not what I would call assets thus far in the postseason because of style too, right? Like you just talked about with Valanciunas, and then secondly, like Toronto's bench was great in Game 1. I mean, they scored 42 points. They doubled them up. Their bench was. Remember, DeRozan didn't shoot it well. Kyle didn't shoot it well in Game 1. Their bench was terrific, and they're a 1 seed. Like I wouldn't overreact if I were Washington about my best players. But I would be concerned about the construct of their roster because they don't have guys that, like when I watch them play, they don't space it well. They don't have a lot of guys who make a lot of IQ basketball plays, I should say. And so I would be more concerned with that. Remember, they've done some things the last couple years that have backfired. Remember, they traded away a first-round pick for Bogdanovich. And they didn't get anything for it. So they've not helped themselves from a roster construct situation, and that's something that they've got to address in the offseason, no matter how this series turns out.
Right.
Going forward in this series, I'd like to see a little bit more playing through Otto Porter. You know, Toronto has put DeRozan on him. I think that's going to be a matchup advantage for Washington, but we haven't really seen too much of it in this series so far. I think that would be something I want to see in Game 3 on Friday.
If they take it apart in Washington, just real quick, what do you guys think is the first thing you have to address? Is it deciding between one of your big stars? Is it, the big Gortat and Mahinmi? You got to do something there. Where would the change be if you're Washington? You're trying to reconfigure that team.
I think
that
probably
to me is where I can start. I really think their core three is good enough. I think they complement each other well enough, and I think they're still young enough. Like again, Otto Porter I think is 23, Bradley Beal's 24, and John Wall's the old man at 27.
Yeah, he's the
I'm not really.
He's the geezer.
I mean, because again, it's easy to say, "Oh, let's start over." There are some teams that have been starting over for a long time, and I'm not that quick to blow something up that is not as broken as we might think. Again, I go back to this team lost 40 games for their best player, and he was hurt prior to leaving. He had issues all season, so I would want to see that group together and growing. I thought Bradley Beal improved. He made the All-Star team this year, so I'm not as quick to make that kind of a change as maybe some might be.
It's just interesting. I mean, I think you go one or two ways after the postseason. Whether only one team wins the championship, but other teams feel like they've made strides or they've gotten to a point where they turn it around and they, get into the postseason, maybe go around deep or two and feel really good about themselves going into an offseason. And there are other teams, even when they crawl into the playoffs, they get bounced early and realize, you know what, we got to make some drastic changes.
Yeah.
Another one of those teams, guys, and we don't have to belabor the point on this series because I think it's playing out the way a lot of people thought, but Boston sure looks good. Even without Kyrie and Gordon Hayward and Marcus Smart, I will say this again. I owe Brad Stevens an apology. I remember when he came from Butler to the league, and I was like, Rondo is going to eat him alive. He's going to be in trouble trying to deal with these veteran NBA players. He has been a master. No matter what they've dealt with, he has turned that thing around in Boston and gotten them playing fantastic basketball. I mean, Jaylen Brown was a monster the other night.
Yeah, the interesting thing is they have the fourth best offense through the first two games, and sort of been about average defensively. So they've had guys step up offensively. Obviously, Jaylen Brown, Terry Rozier, Horford has maybe been a little bit more aggressive. Yeah.
Well, don't tell anybody in Atlanta about Al Horford. They run you out of town, shoe. They don't think he has any value.
I think that's a surprising thing. I think they go on the road. Maybe that will one of these guys is going to cool off, or multiple guys are going to cool off. But it's also a little bit disappointing for the Milwaukee defense that they haven't been able to keep these guys in check.
Let's to me. The conversation we just had about Washington, that's the conversation I would have about Milwaukee.
Yeah.
That's the team that has major issues in terms of the way that team is put together. And, again, a lot of what Boston did, it was against porous defense. Milwaukee, to me, is I don't even want to say they're an enigma. I think they are the most overrated roster of all the playoff teams. And I say that because of how talented Giannis is. But that's a roster that, big picture, they have more concerns, I think, because, Giannis is a core. Chris Middleton is a very good player. And for them, he's their second best player. And I think in a lot of ways, therein lies their problems.
Yeah.
Part of it. And then the rest of that roster, that they don't have anybody on the floor that you have to really worry about, that you have to game plan for other than, I believe, Giannis. And a big part of Giannis is if you can limit him in transition, right? His transition attacks, he gets a lot of his offense from that. Now, It's hard to limit, but if you can somehow affect that, you can have success. Like, that's a team, Boston got the perfect matchup. That's the one team that I felt like that they could handle, and it could end up being easily. I do think Milwaukee, I'd be shocked if they got swept, but I could definitely see this thing going 5 games because I do feel like the things that Boston's doing against them offensively, those guys are capable against teams that aren't great defensively.
Right.
And that's been the issue for Milwaukee for the last 2 years.
Jabari Parker, another question mark, Shu. What do you do with Jabari?
I say right now he's not a very good player.
I know.
Defensively, he's been terrible, and offensively, he just doesn't. He doesn't shoot threes very well, and doesn't get to the basket and to the free throw line enough to make up for that. And so I don't know what you do with this guy. I mean, it's a fascinating question. I mean, I would love to see, this same roster or something close to it with a fresh approach next year and a new coach and a fresh approach next year. Somebody who can, who will get them switching more often on defense. Will experiment with lineups where you get Giannis Antetokounmpo at the 5.
Right.
I would like to see that, but Parker's been disappointing. Eric Bledsoe has been a disappointment.
Who?
I don't know. It's been rough.
What's his name? I'll tell you what. You might want to be cool on the smack talk in the playoffs when you're getting worked the way the Celtics are working the Milwaukee Bucks. Shu, I want you to stick around before we get out of here. We got a little title to hand out for bragging rights. And seeing as how it's been a few weeks, I can't remember if I won or lost. I'm going to need some moral support if I didn't win. So
you lost.
I want to recount.
No, you lost. It ended up being the Wolves losing to the Nuggets was the difference maker. GA finished the season 29-22. Sekou 27-24.
Come on, son. Man.
Every game matters.
Apparently so. And apparently that overtime burned me. Sure, you got room. Sure, you got room in the garage for me. I'm probably gonna have to get out of my house, and then nobody won't speak to me after they find out I lost bragging rights.
I'm not gonna tell you. Keep that between me and you and I listen.
And the audience. Yeah.
We gonna keep it on the pod, baby. We gonna keep it on the pod.
Oh well, this won't be the first time I've lost bragging rights. Probably won't be the last. Listen, Shu. I appreciate you as always. Even though we don't have any more bragging rights, we still have Schumann Stat for as long as the Hang Time podcast is rolling. So you better come with something next week as well as we all continue our playoff travels. GA, be safe down there in the Big Easy now. Keep your money in your pocket. I know how close the casino is. It's right down the street.
Casinos are close, though.
It's right there. It's right there. Appreciate everybody joining us, as always. Our main man, Steve Ashburner, as well. If you haven't already, subscribe to Hang Time on Apple Podcasts for new episodes all throughout the playoffs. And don't forget to leave a review. And yes, I lost bragging rights.
Thanks for listening to the Hang Time Podcast. And be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts for a new episode every Thursday this season. And as always, say Kuna Matata.